Welcome back, night owls and history enthusiasts. Tonight we're stepping away from the marble columns and gladiatorial spectacles you've seen in movies. We're diving deep into what it was actually like to be an ordinary person in ancient Rome around 150 CE. Forget Russell Crowe and his noble speeches, so settle in, hit that like button if you appreciate these deep dives into forgotten realities, and let me know in the comments what corner of the world you're watching from tonight. I love seeing our global community of insomniacs and history lovers unite. Now find your most comfortable position, maybe grab a warm drink, and let's transport ourselves back nearly 2,000 years. Yes, you've just opened your eyes in the year 152 CE. Congratulations, you're alive, which honestly puts you ahead of about half the babies born this decade. But before you celebrate, take a deep breath. The air in your tiny apartment reeks of something that's part rotting fish, part human desperation, and part mystery stench that you've learned not to investigate too close. You're lying on what generously could be called a bed. A wooden frame with rope stretched across it, topped with a thin mattress stuffed with straw that's probably older than you are. Share your sleeping space with beetles, mice, and occasionally a rat who's clearly given up on life as much as you have. Your pillow is a cloth sack filled with whatever you could find. More straw rags, maybe some feathers if you got lucky and found a dead pigeon. The room you call home is about the size of a modern walk-in closet located on the fourth floor of an insula, a Roman apartment building that's basically a vertical slum. 5 or 6 families live in this building, sharing one communal latrine that's exactly as pleasant as it sounds. Your walls are thin enough that you know intimate details about your neighbors' lives, their arguments, their digestive issues, and their questionable life choices. As you sit up, your joints protest. You're 28 years old, which, in Roman terms, makes you practically elderly. Your back aches from yesterday's labor. Your hands are permanently stained from whatever work you managed to find. And your feet are covered in calluses thick enough to walk on broken pottery. It's convenient because the streets are literally paved with broken pottery, among other things. Candles cost more than food, and oil lamps are a constant fire hazard in these wooden tinderboxes masquerading as homes. You can hear cartwheels clattering on stone streets below, vendors already shouting their wares, and the general cacophony of a million people. At least, that's what the emperors keep telling you. You swing your legs over the side of your bed and immediately step on something squishy. You don't look down. Experience has taught you that ignorance is often bliss when it comes to mysterious floor substances in ancient Rome. Your bare feet touch the cold stone floor, and you're reminded that Romans invented many things. Roads, aqueducts, concrete, and bureaucracy. Looking around your humble domain, you see everything you own in the world. A wooden bowl, a clay cup with a chip in it, 2 tunics that have seen better decades, a cloak that's more patches than original fabric, and a small knife that serves as your only tea. This is your entire material existence. Medieval people 500 years from now will look back at this and think, at least we're not living like that anymore. These insulae are architectural marvels in the same way that a house of cards is an engineering triumph. They're tall, unstable, and prone to sudden catastrophic collapse. Building codes exist in theory, but enforcement is about as reliable as Roman weather predictions. Every time you hear a strange noise, you wonder if today is the day your home decides to become a pile of rubble with you somewhere in the middle. Outside your tiny window, and yes, you're lucky enough to have a window, even if it's just a hole in the wall with no glass. You have about 30 seconds to appreciate the dawn before reality crashes back in. You need to find work today, or you don't eat. It's that simple, and that terrifying. So you've achieved consciousness in ancient Rome. Now comes the fun part, personal hygiene. And by fun, I mean absolutely nightmarish by any reasonable standard. You stumble out of your room and down the narrow, dark staircase that's probably killed. Communal latrine awaits. Roman public toilets are a social experience whether you want them to be or not. Picture a long stone bench with holes cut in it. No stalls, no privacy screens, just you and 15 of your closest neighbors. The Romans, in their infinite wisdom, thought this was perfectly normal. They even conducted business meetings in latrines. Nothing says, "Let's discuss grain prices," quite like the sound of communal. Beneath the bench, a channel of flowing water carries waste away. This sounds civilized until you realize that the same water flows from person to person down the line. If you're at the wrong end of the bench, you're essentially sitting downstream from everyone else's problems. He used a sponge on a stick called a xylospongium, which sounds fancy until you realize it's shared among everyone and cleaned by swishing it in the same water that's flowing beneath the toilets. After this delightful communal experience, you might want to wash your hands. There's a small basin near the latrine, but the water is whatever's left from yesterday, probably with a few things floating in it that you'd prefer not to identify. Soap exists, but it's made from animal fat and ash, costs more than you earn in a week, and smells like a campfire had a fight with a butcher shop. If you're feeling fancy and have an extra coin, you might visit the public baths later. But that's an all-day affair and costs money you probably don't have. Most Romans bathe maybe once a week if they're lucky. The rest of the time, you just smell like everyone else, which creates a sort of olfactory democracy. Nobody smells great, so nobody notices. Your teeth are another adventure entirely. Toothbrushes won't be invented for another 1500 years. Romans clean their teeth with twigs if they clean them at all. Toothpaste is made from crushed bones, oyster shells, and sometimes urine. Yes, urine. Roman poets literally wrote about the whitening power of Spanish urine being superior to local varieties. This is documented history, not a fever dream. By the time you've completed your morning hygiene routine, you feel about as fresh as a week-old fish in the Mediterranean sun. But you're clean enough by Roman standards, which is to say, you're not actively decomposing. Time for breakfast, which in ancient Rome is less of a meal and more of a survival strategy. You've survived the bathroom experience. Reward yourself with food. Just kidding, there is no reward. Breakfast in ancient Rome is not the most important meal of the day. It's barely a meal at all. If you're lucky and employed, you start your day with some bread. Not good bread, that's for people with money. Your bread is coarse, gritty, and often contains things that aren't technically bread ingredients. The loaf is so hard you could use it as a weapon, and given Rome's crime rates, you might need to. Romans drink wine like Americans drink coffee, which explains a lot about Roman history. If money's tight, you're drinking water that you hope won't kill you. It's expensive. Meat is a luxury for feast days and fantasies. Fish might be possible if you live near the Tiber River and don't mind the taste of whatever Rome has been dumping in it for the past century. Most of your nutrition comes from grain, wheat if you're doing well, barley if you're not. The government occasionally hands out free grain to keep the population from rioting, but the line starts before dawn, and sometimes the grain runs out before you reach the front. Honey is the only sweetener available, and it costs more than most people see in a month. Sugar won't be widely available for another 1,000 years, so your palate is adjusted to bland, gritty, and occasionally bitter flavors. Salt is precious enough to pay soldiers with, hence the word salary, so everything is under-seasoned by modern standards. So Romans don't do leisurely breakfast conversations over morning newspapers. You consume whatever calories you can afford. Stomach is maybe 30% full, your taste buds are confused, and your energy levels are running on fumes and determination, which, spoiler alert, still involves a lot of suffering if you're not in the top 1% of Roman society. Now fed with your daily ration of disappointment and grit, it's time to watch, and work in ancient Rome means whatever back-breaking labor you can convince someone to pay you for. There's no unemployment insurance, no workers' compensation, and definitely no casual Fridays. If you're skilled, maybe you're a carpenter, a blacksmith, or a potter. These are good jobs by Roman standards. but most likely you're unskilled labor, which means you compete with thousands of other desperate people for jobs that barely pay enough to keep you alive. Work is always available because Romans are constantly building something: temples, roads, aqueducts, or another palace for whoever's emperor this week. The work is dangerous, the hours are long, and the pay is whatever the foreman feels like giving you. You lift stones that weigh more than you do, carry materials up rickety scaffolding, and operate tools that can remove fingers as easily as they shape marble. Workplace safety regulations won't be invented for another 18th century. If construction isn't available, there's always dock work. Rome's port of Ostia is a constant hub of activity, with ships arriving from every corner of the empire loaded with grain, exotic goods, and opportunities to herniate something important. You carry amphoras filled with wine, oil, or other liquids, each weighing about as much as a small child. Drop one and it comes out of your pay. Drop too many and you don't get paid at all. Street cleaning is another option, though calling it cleaning is optimistic. Roman streets are repositories for everything unwanted: broken pottery, food scraps, human waste, dead animals, and the occasional body of someone who picked the wrong political faction. Your job is to scrape up this mixture of civilization's failures and cart it outside the city wall. The pay is slightly better, but you're inside all day breathing flour dust, smoke, or whatever toxic fumes your particular trade produces. Romans haven't invented occupational health standards yet, so if your job slowly kills you with lung disease, that's just Tuesday. Working hours stretch from dawn to dusk. Sundays won't become a day of rest for another few centuries. You work until your body gives out, you can't find work anymore, or you die. Retirement is a concept for rich people and philosophers. The foreman or shop owner takes every opportunity to remind you that you're replaceable. There are always 10 other people desperate enough to do your job for less money. Job security is a luxury that doesn't exist when half the population lives one missed meal away from starvation. By midday, you're exhausted, covered in whatever substances your work involves, and you still have 6 more hours until sunset. Your back aches, your hands are raw, and you're already dreading tomorrow. But you push through because the alternative is not eating tonight, and not eating tonight means maybe not waking up tomorrow. This is progress Roman style. You're a tiny cog in the greatest empire the world has ever known, and your job is to turn that cog until you can't anymore. After 10 hours of whatever degrading labor you managed to secure, the sun finally sets over the eternal city. Time to head home to your shoebox apartment and whatever passes for dinner in your economic bracket. You drag your exhausted body through streets that have somehow become even more chaotic since morning. Evening in Rome is when the city truly comes alive, and not in a good way. The streets fill with people heading home from work, vendors trying to sell their last remaining goods at desperate prices. Rome after dark is not a place for tourism. You climb the creaking stairs to your 4th floor apartment, each step a reminder that your knees are older than your years. The insulae sounds like it's having a structural crisis, but it's held together for another day, so you're optimistic about your chances of survival until morning. Dinner is whatever you could afford after paying for lodging, which isn't much. Maybe some bread left over from breakfast, possibly some cheese if you found extra work today, or a small portion of garum, fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything because it's cheap and has protein. Garum tastes exactly like it sounds, but it keeps you alive, so you develop an appreciation for controlled culinary suffering. You eat by the light of whatever small flame you can afford, maybe a tiny oil lamp if you're feeling wealthy, or just the moonlight if you're being economical. Romans go to bed early not because they're health conscious, but because staying awake costs money they don't have. As you settle into your straw mattress for another night of sharing space with various insects and rodents, you reflect on your day. You survived. You earned enough to eat something. You have shelter that probably won't collapse before morning. By Roman standards, this counts as a successful day. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again. The communal latrine, the gritty bread, the back-breaking work, the climb up 4 flights of stairs. This is your life in the greatest civilization. It's not glorious, it's not noble, and it's definitely not sanitary. but you're alive in Rome at the height of its power, participating in history whether you know it or not. The buildings you construct will inspire architecture for millennia. The empire you're helping to maintain will influence law, language, and government long after everyone you know is dust. You're just trying to make it to tomorrow with enough energy to find work and enough money to eat. History is something that happens to other people, emperors and senators and generals whose names will be remembered. But really, history is that millions of ordinary people like you getting up every day, doing whatever work they can find, eating whatever food they can afford, and going to bed hoping tomorrow will be just slightly less difficult. History is the collective story of humanity trying to survive and maybe, just maybe, find moments of happiness between the sufferings. So as you drift off to sleep in your ancient Roman apartment, surrounded by the sounds of a million other people doing exactly the same thing, remember that you are history. Not the history that gets written in books, but the history that actually happened, one ordinary, difficult, beautiful day at a time. Sweet dreams, citizen. Try not to think about what that scurrying sound is. It's probably just a mouse. And that's a day in the life of an ordinary person in ancient Rome. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history's less comfortable moments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into daily life in the ancient world, let me know what other time periods and places you'd like to explore.